Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. Folks, I'm so excited today to be joined by Mr. Tim Healey, the voice of the Arizona State Sun Devils since 1983. He's a Penn State alum. Perhaps most importantly, he's also a native of the D.C. area, graduated from Annandale High School. Mr. Healey, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Billy. Always good to talk to someone else from Nova.
For sure. Well, I want to start off with first, how have you been handling this pandemic? I mean, this is something that has impacted our lives both professionally and personally. So how have you been handling this last year or so?
And it's been rough on everybody, certainly, Billy. From a personal standpoint, it actually has not been as horrifically difficult an adjustment for me as maybe for some people, because I've worked out of my home in my job here at Arizona State. I've officed out of my house now for 20 years. So I'm kind of used to being at home a lot. And until she retired almost 2 years ago, my wife was working at a nearby Catholic school. And so I was not only used to being home, but being alone at home for a good chunk of every day. So sheltering in place has been a fairly easy adjustment, I guess you could say, on that level for me. But certainly just the lack of interaction with other people because of the pandemic, and the lack of socializing has been a challenge for everybody, obviously. In fact, interestingly, my wife and I have been invited to dinner by friends of ours this Saturday night. The woman is a diehard Arizona State fan, she and her husband, and all four of us have been fully vaccinated. And this will be, I think, the first kind of interaction for the two of us outside of our family. We have two adult children and a granddaughter out here in the Phoenix area, but it'll be our first interaction, I think, since the pandemic started. So we're actually, kind of looking forward to that. But it's obviously, it's been a terrific challenge for everybody personally and professionally. It's been a challenge because broadcasters and sports broadcasters, play-by-play, we've had to kind of reinvent ourselves on the fly in terms of the way we do business. Arizona State Radio, we have not traveled with the Sun Devils. I'm the voice of the Sun Devil football, men's basketball, and baseball teams out here. And we have not traveled in any of the sports that I do all year long. We in football and basketball, we did road game broadcasts from the ASU campus. We took over a conference room in the athletic building and basically set up an impromptu radio broadcast studio there with a couple of big television screens, and literally called the game off television, getting feeds, video and audio feeds from the stadium or the arena of our opponent, and trying to replicate the sound so that a listener would think that we were actually there. And I think for the most part, we were able to successfully pull that off. And that's been the paradigm that's been used in all sports, I think, since the COVID-19 struck. Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, not too many broadcasters, at least in the last year, have traveled with their respective teams or their respective schools. So, and in addition, doing things that would be second nature to us, like gathering pregame interviews, for instance. Before every, for instance, ASU basketball game, I get a pregame interview with our head coach, Bobby Hurley, the former Duke All-American, and one of our players. But now we have to do it via the mechanism you and I are using right now, Zoom. I tell you, I don't know who invented Zoom, but that person may end up being, Time Magazine's Man of the Year or Person of the Year, because, what an impact Zoom has had on our world. I mean, we've been able to quasi-function through all of this pandemic in large part because of the ability to Zoom like you and I are doing right now. A lot of people conduct their day-to-day business 8 hours a day, 5 days a week via Zoom. And in my world, we do a lot of our interviews, pregame interviews with players and coaches by Zoom. I host, right now in the spring, I host 2 weekly radio shows at Arizona State, a podcast co-hosted by ASU's athletic director, Ray Anderson, And then I do a weekly half-hour of baseball conversation show with Arizona State's head baseball coach, Tracy Smith. And those shows are done by Zoom. And it's interesting because it's almost, in some ways, an easier and more convenient way to do your business, rather than having to pack up my briefcase and head over to Arizona State and sit through a practice and then wait for practice to end. And then I get a face-to-face interview with Bobby and a player, and then I drive home and listen to the audio and edit it and feed it to the radio station. You do it by Zoom in the comfort of your own home, in the spare office of my home where I am right now. And then when I'm done, I just email the audio file to the radio station, and bada boom, bada bing, we have a pregame interview. So I really think a lot of the ways that people do business and do things post-pandemic are going to change because of the way they've had to do them during the pandemic. And I think a lot more people are going to office out of their homes. Telecommute, I guess, is the fancy phrase for it. And I'm going to be interested to see how a lot of people in my business do their business. You know, we may continue to do interviews by Zoom. And the thing that scares me a little bit, Billy, is I'm just kind of curious as to what the people that run, like, for instance, college radio networks, are they going to start thinking, you know what? During the pandemic, we were able to get broadcasts on the air of our football and men's basketball games without traveling our guys. And that saved a huge expense. And because a lot of us are in financial difficulty because of the pandemic, that I wouldn't be surprised if there are some pro sports teams or some college athletic departments that decide that maybe they don't need to travel their radio, at least in the short term, at the end of whenever this thing ends, because they were able to get broadcasts on the air the other way at much less expense to them. You know, you don't have to travel your radio crew, you don't have to lodge them, you don't have to feed them. You don't have to pay for their rent car expenses or their Uber or Lyft expenses. So I'm going to be curious to see how people do business post-pandemic because of all that. But certainly, it's been a worldwide game changer on so many levels. And like everyone else on the planet, we're just trying to adapt.
You obviously have been with Arizona State now for over 3 decades. I was curious, what are some of your favorite memories covering the Sun Devils?
Oh, wow. Quite a few of them. You're right. This is my 23rd year as the radio voice, but I actually did their television play-by-play for about 10 years before that. So you're right. It's been over 3 decades, I think, since I've been broadcasting ASU sports since 1988, really, and a lot of good memories. I will say that it's been one of my, I guess it's just kind of been my fate in life that the 23 years that I have been the voice here, our programs, our football and men's basketball programs, to be very candid, have been fairly average, on a year-to-year basis. We've had a pretty good season here or there, but, I'm still waiting actually for maybe that ultra great season in one of those sports. Our baseball team did go to the College World Series 4 times in a 6-year span from 2005 to 2010, and that was really exciting. But there have been a lot of great memories. Some of the ones that come to the front of my mind, we won a ball game at USC, football game in October of 2014 on a Hail Mary pass on the final play of the game, a play that became known at ASU as the Jail Mary because Jalen Strong was the receiver who caught the pass from Mike Bercovici, our quarterback, for a touchdown that beat the Trojans on the final play. It was a 46-yard prayer on the last play of the game, and the Devils won 38-34. And our call was pretty exciting, and we went crazy, and it was an amazing moment. But what's really compelling for me is that game happened to be my 200th career radio broadcast of an Arizona State football game. And in commemoration of the moment, our football coach at the time, Todd Graham, actually presented me with the game ball. And this is it right here. This is the actual ball that was thrown from Mike Bercovici to Jalen Strong, and commemorating my 200th broadcast. So sometimes there you get the feeling that if you're not already a believer, and I am, that there is a higher power at work sometimes in our world, because it just was an amazing moment for me, and one that I'll always remember. And it was actually a play that sparked a terrific season for the Sun Devils. Just the week before, they had been clobbered at home by the other Pac-12 LA team, UCLA. I think it was 63-27. And then 9 days later, they go to the Coliseum and pull off that win. And then I think they went on to win like 6 or 7 in a row. They had a 10-win season that year and ended up defeating Duke in the Sun Bowl to finish 10-3. And that was one of the best seasons of Arizona State football that I broadcast. So certainly that play is right at the top of my list. I have 2 other thrills in each sport. It's interesting. I think that's probably my biggest thrill football-wise here. In basketball, since Bobby Hurley has been our head coach at Arizona State, he came here in 2015. He has significantly upgraded the level of the Sun Devils men's basketball schedule in the non-conference. And the highlight of that component of his era here, we played Kansas in back-to-back years in December of 17 and December of 2018. And we went to fabled Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, Kansas on Sunday, December 10th, 2017. And at a time when Arizona State was undefeated. And ASU, as I said, has been very, very average to at times below average in basketball over the long term of the 23 years that I've been the radio voice. But they got off to a good start that year. It became known as Guard U because it was a guard-oriented offense coached by the all-time greatest point guard in college basketball history. And 2 nights before, we had played at the Staples Center and beaten St. John's in a game in one of those one-night tournaments. And then we had to turn around and on Saturday fly from LA to Kansas City and bus to Lawrence, Kansas for a Sunday afternoon game at Allen Fieldhouse. And I'm a huge college basketball fan, and I've never been to Allen Fieldhouse, and I was just really excited about it. And honestly, we didn't expect to win, but you were just hoping that the Devils would compete and that it would be a great experience to broadcast a game from one of the most famous arenas and field houses in all of college basketball. And then in the game itself, the Devils fell behind 15-2. And my broadcast partner, Kyle Dodd, a former Sun Devil point guard, he and I looked at each other and we kind of said, yeah, it was a nice run, but it's going to end today, but hopefully we can come back. And little could we have envisioned what ensued over the next 30 to 60 minutes, because our guys just started making shots and battled back. And I think they got to within 2 or 3 at halftime. And then in the second half, they were just on fire. And lo and behold, at game's end, it was Arizona State 95, Kansas 85. And it was just a compelling moment because, to win a game against, and Kansas was ranked 2nd in the country at the time, and to beat such a good team and ended up as a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament that year, by the way. But to beat such a good team and to do it in Allen Fieldhouse, I mean, it was a feeling unlike any other I've ever had. And I remember after the game, we had to bus to Kansas City. It's about a 45-minute ride for our flight home to Phoenix that Sunday night. And that bus ride, you'd be surprised, it was quiet, but everybody, I think, was just shocked and satisfied. And, everyone's probably looking at their phone, checking out their Twitter and their text messages. But it was just such an extraordinarily satisfying moment. And then the next year, the home and home, Kansas came to Arizona State 3 days before Christmas. And that year they were ranked number 1 in the country. And ASU was coming off a 16-point loss to what proved to be a bad Vanderbilt team at Vanderbilt. And lo and behold, the Sun Devils, though trailing most of the game, it was a competitive, hard-fought game. We had a capacity crowd, one of the few sellout crowds for a non-rivalry game with Arizona that we've ever had at Arizona State since I've been the radio voice. And the Devils chipped their way back into that game. And at game's end, ASU had pulled off an upset of Kansas, 82. I think it was 80-76 or 82-76. But they beat the number one ranked team in the country. So they beat Kansas in back-to-back years. And those wins were just incredible moments for the program. And then my biggest moment in baseball, our baseball team in 2005 made the NCAA tournament, actually got selected to host a regional as a 2 seed because they were a team that was talented, but kind of underachieved a little bit during the regular season. But they came together in postseason. We swept the 3 games of our home regional and then went to play one of Arizona State's longtime postseason rivals and nemesis, Cal State Fullerton, in a 2 out of 3 super regional at Fullerton for the right to go to the College World Series. And we lost game 1 of the super regional on a play I've never seen called before. The umpire in the ASU led 2-1 going into the bottom of the 9th. Fullerton got I think a guy on base and then a triple to score the tying run. So they had a runner at third, nobody out, and they were probably going to win the ball game anyway. But Arizona State's only strategy was to walk the bases loaded and try to hope for a force at any base, get a force out at the plate, get a double play, going home to first, that sort of thing. And the umpire actually called a balk on ASU's pitcher during the intentional walk, allowing the winning run to score. I mean, it was a jaw dropper. To this day, I can't believe that umpire made that call. And in fact, it was so stunning that Kevin Costner, the actor, is a huge Cal State Fullerton baseball fan. He's an alum of Cal State Fullerton. He's a fan. I think he's a donor. And he was in the front row of the seats for all 3 of those games in that super regional. I think he was there with his new wife at the time. I'm not sure. But in any event, as he's walking out of the ballpark, Goodwin Field is the name of their field at Fullerton. After that game, my broadcast partner, the late Bob Eager, a former longtime terrific Arizona sports writer, Eags and I were doing our post-game wrap-up, and we were sitting in seats in front of the press box because in postseason, a lot of times these small college baseball parks with ESPN televising all the regional and super regional games, a lot of times they have to put visiting radio in the overflow section. So we're out in the stands. And Kevin Costner walked by us and he looked at us and he just shrugged his shoulders as if to say, I can't explain it. I've never seen anything like that. So to their credit, the Sun Devils bounced back the next day with a 6-2 win to force a deciding game 3. And game 3 was an epic game. ASU fell behind 7-1 and yet stormed back, rallied, and in a 4-hour, 9-inning game, they won 10-9 to punch their ticket to the College World Series. And then in Omaha, ASU lost its opening game against Nebraska, whose pitcher at the time was Jabba Chamberlain, who went on to pitch for the New York Yankees and the Detroit Tigers. And when you lose game 1 at the World Series, then you're automatically in the losers bracket. And that's a long way to go to get back into the fray to get to the final championship round. But ASU then proceeded to win 3 consecutive elimination games. And the middle one of those 3 was one of the all-time great games in the history of the College World Series. It was against Nebraska. And of course, you're in Omaha, so you're in Husker country to begin with. And there were 24,000 fans in Rosenblatt Stadium on that warm Tuesday afternoon, and 23,000 of them were wearing red. And what unfolded was one of the great games in the history of the College World Series. Arizona State took a lead into the top of the 9th inning, and then a Nebraska outfielder, and the young man's name escapes my memory right now, whose father was at the time suffering from cancer and sadly passed away not long afterward. This kid hits a 3-run homer to put the Huskers ahead 7-5. And Arizona State, it's an elimination game. So it was just a stunning turn of events. The Sun Devils come up in the bottom of the ninth inning. They get a run. They have 2 outs, and they have their best slugger, a kid by the name of Jeff Larish, who earlier in the game had hit 2 home runs, one to left field, one to right field. And Larish is up with the season on the line. And lo and behold, if he doesn't smoke one over the center field fence to become the second player in the history of the College World Series to hit 3 homers in one game, and that one tied the ball game. They went to extra innings, and then the son of one of ASU's assistant coaches got a bloop RBI single in the bottom of the 11th, and the Sun Devils won the ball game. And I think it was 9-8 was the final score, and it was, I think it was maybe 8-7. Anyway, memory's getting fuzzy, but it was one of the all-time great games in the history of the College World Series. In fact, Billy, it was so good that ASU the next day defeated Florida, and then the next day had to play Florida again, and the winner of that game was going to go to the finals, the best 2 out of 3 finals, to play LSU for the national champion, or to play Texas, I beg your pardon, for the national championship. And we eventually lost that final game to Florida. So we were flying home on Friday of that week, 3 days after that epic game against Nebraska. We're flying home to Phoenix on Frontier Airlines, and I'd never flown Frontier Airlines before. They're based in Denver, and we went Omaha to Denver, changed planes, Denver to Phoenix, and Frontier Airlines was the first one. This is 2005, so it's a while ago, but it was the first airline I'd ever been on that you could actually get direct TV on the plane. And so we're flying home from Denver to Phoenix, and what they let you do is they let you sample it for 5 minutes, and then you decide if you want it. And I think you have to pay a fee to get it. And I figure, we're out of the World Series. My summer vacation has started. What the heck? I'll spring for DirecTV. So I got it, and I turned on to ESPN Classic. And lo and behold, if the game they were starting to show just as I turned on ESPN Classic was an instant classic, and it was the ASU Nebraska baseball game from 3 days before. That's how good a ball game that was. But that whole run in Omaha and that whole postseason run was my biggest baseball thrill. So I know I'm rambling, but those are probably 3 highlights in each of the 3 sports. And it's like I like to tell people out here, I'm kind of hoping that in all 3 sports, the biggest highlight is yet to come. Even though I'm 69 years old, I don't have any plans to retire. And my bucket list wish is to be behind the mic when Arizona State wins a national championship in one of the 3 sports. I don't care which one. You can pick. Anyone can pick, and I'll take it. But that would be the biggest thrill of my professional lifetime there.
What do you remember about working with James Harden?
James, just an incredibly talented player. You could just see that from the moment he set foot on campus. And he was only here 2 years, but they were 2 really good years. In fact, his first season playing for Herb Sendek, who was the longtime coach at North Carolina State, and Herb came out to Arizona State, took over the Sun Devil basketball program in 2006. In his first year, the team went 8-22. But they were really competitive in Pac-12 play, and everyone had hope because they knew that James Harden was on the way. He was coming the next year from Artesia High School in Los Angeles, and his high school point guard, Derek Glasser, had already arrived at Arizona State, as Derek was supposed to be a recruited walk-on at USC, and that arrangement fell through, and he came out to ASU, and lo and behold, ended up as the all-time assist leader in school history. And then the next year, James arrives, and they went from 22 losses to 21 wins in the quarterfinals of the NIT. And then in his second year, 2008-2009, ASU had one of the best seasons in program history, as they ended up with 26 victories, advanced to the championship game of the Pac. Then it was the Pac-10. Now, of course, the Pac-12, the conference tournament at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, and should have won it. They had a 15-point halftime lead and let it slip away and lost to USC 66-63 in the championship game. But they got to the title game, only time Arizona State's ever been to the Pac-12 tournament title game, and then made the NCAA tournament and advanced to the round of 32. They were seeded in Miami as a 6 seed. They beat Temple in the first round and then lost to Jim Boeheim's Syracuse team in round 2. But Harden was just a really, really gifted player. I am honestly surprised a little bit at the megastar that he has become. I mean, I knew he would go on to the pros, and I knew he'd be a good player. I didn't think he would become arguably the best or one of the very best players in all the NBA, but that he has. I mean, just really, really a super, super talented player and the most talented player in basketball that I've seen out here.
What about Dustin Pedroia? He ended up winning 2 World Series with the Red Sox, was a leader on that team, and before all that, he was a star at ASU.
One of my favorites, just one of the most feisty, competitive players you'll ever see. You know, he probably should play every game with a dirty uniform to start because that's just the kind of grinder he was and is. He was a shortstop at Arizona State, but yet ended up being a second baseman with the Red Sox. And he was the best baseball player I've seen at ASU. James Harden is the best basketball player, and Dustin Pedroia is the best baseball player I saw. I mean, he was on the verge of being a 400 career hitter out here. Played 3 years from 2002 to 2004. The sad thing for Pedro, as we called him, is that he never got to play in the World Series. That Sun Devil run at the College World Series that I told you about in 2005 was the year after Dustin had left Arizona State. And I just wish for his sake that he had gotten the chance to play the College World Series. Ultimately, he got plenty of World Series experience with the Red Sox, and I think he'll take that. But I know deep down he would have loved to have played with one of Coach Pat Murphy's ASU teams in Omaha and use that as a national stage to display his talents. But he was just such a feisty, competitive player, a terrific defensive player in the middle infield, and also a really, really good hitter. And I got to know his parents, Guy and Debbie Pedroia. I think his dad owned a tire shop in a town not too far from Sacramento. And they would come to every single game, home and away. For them, every game was a road trip, but they came to every game. And it was kind of a family affair because Dustin's uncle was none other than Phil Snow, who was our former football defensive coordinator. And, one other Arizona State moment in football that I neglected to mention, I didn't broadcast the game, I guess is why I didn't reference it. But without question, the biggest football win that Arizona State's had in the time I've lived out here was their epic 19-0 shutout of then number 1 ranked and 2-time defending national champion Nebraska in September of 1996. And Phil Snow was the Sun Devils defensive coordinator under head coach Bruce Snyder at that time. And Phil was the architect of that defense that blanked the Huskers. And his nephew was Dustin Pedroia. And later, Dustin had a cousin by the name of Andrew Snow who played infield at Arizona State. So it became quite a family affair, but boy, he's a good one. And, he's still a friend. He's a Facebook friend now and starting life in retirement. And about 5 years ago, I guess it was, my wife and I took a vacation to New England. And as part of it, I got to see my first ever Red Sox game at Fenway Park. And I kept trying to work Dustin's mom, Debbie Pedroia, to get tickets, but bought 2 just to make sure we'd get in the park. We actually saw the Red Sox play the Giants on an interleague game in mid-July of 2016, and that was David Ortiz's final year, and he had a 3-run homer that night, so it was really cool. And my sister came up from New Jersey to watch the game because she became a big Red Sox fan since DC didn't have baseball most of our childhood, or at least my sister's childhood. She's 10 years younger than me. She became a Red Sox fan because our late mother is from Brockton, Massachusetts. So they came up and we had a great time. But Debbie Pedroia texted me about in the 3rd inning of that game and said, "Did you get your tickets?" And I thought to myself, are you kidding me? I had to buy these. There's tickets waiting for me. So I actually got up and we were down the right field line. I had to go all the way down to the front of the ballpark and get in line and check the will call window, and there were no tickets left for me. So it's a good thing I bought the ones I had. But yeah, Dustin Pedroia was just, man, he was special. He was clearly the best baseball player I've ever seen at Arizona State.
And the last athlete I want to ask you about is Terrell Suggs. I mean, he won a Super Bowl with the Ravens, a superb defensive player. He won Defensive Player of the Year one year. What do you remember about Suggs at Arizona State?
Well, of all the Arizona State football players that have come through in the time I've been the radio voice, I'm not sure that any one of them ever had as dominating a season as Terrell did in 2002 when he had 24 sacks in that one year and set the NCAA single season record for quarterback sacks. An absolute terror on the pass rush off the edge. He was a really good running back at one of the high schools here in the Phoenix area in a suburb, Chandler, Arizona. And but yet when he came to ASU, our former coach, the late Bruce Snyder, saw something in Terrell that led Bruce to put him on defense. And he became one of the all-time great defensive linemen in school, and I think in college football history. And in that season, Bruce had departed Arizona State, had been let go a couple of years prior, and Dirk Cutter was our head coach at the time. And Suggs was just magnificent that whole 2002 season, and just an unbelievable athlete. I think he could have been a really good power running back at the college level, but really found his niche as an edge rusher. Say that 3 times fast. And we've had a lot of football players that have had really good seasons, and a lot of athletes, but I not only in football, but I'd say of any of the athletes in any of the 3 sports for which I broadcast out here, I'm not sure any of them had as dominant a season in their sport at their craft than Terrell Suggs did in 2002 with those 24 sacks.
Mr. Healey, you've been so gracious with your time. I have 2 final questions for you. My first one is, what's your advice to aspiring sportscasters like me who want to make it in this business? I mean, you know better than anyone, it's already a competitive business. In the last year, we've dealt with the realities of this pandemic. So what's your advice to young guys and girls like me who want to get into this field?
Wow, that's a good one. I tell you, from my own perspective, you get to this stage in your career, and I'd like to be able to sit here and tell you, I wouldn't do a thing differently. I do it just the way I did it. Like the Frank Sinatra song, I do it my way. But I would do things a little differently. The one I wish I had gotten into the play-by-play realm of sports broadcasting earlier. I didn't start as the radio voice at Arizona State until I was just on the verge of my 47th birthday when I became ASU's radio voice. Now, I had done ASU television play-by-play for the 10 years before that, but on television at the college level, when you're doing the local TV package, you're only doing selected games here or there. And when you're the radio voice, you do every game, home and away. And that's the fun part of it. And I also, for 1 year, was also the radio broadcaster for the Arizona Cardinals. I was actually their play-by-play guy in 1995, 1 year under Buddy Ryan. And I did the Cardinals preseason games on television for 5 years before that. But the Arizona State radio job was my first real full-time play-by-play opportunity, and I wish I had gotten into it earlier. Right out of college, I probably would have tried to get a job with a minor league baseball team, Class A, where you'd be a little bit of everything. You'd either be in sales, or you'd be the public relations director and also the play-by-play announcer. You'd work, long hours, but it would be a foot in the door and a great way to get experience that way, or go to work in a small town, maybe at a small college or a place where you can broadcast high school sports on the radio and just get some opportunities to do the work and hope that your talent and with a few breaks, your talent and some breaks might take you a long way. But as far as just getting into the business in general, I would urge young people to really be committed, because in some ways, I almost think it's tougher for young people like you now, given the fact not only A, that it's so competitive, but B, there are so many platforms out there. In a way, maybe that's good, because with so many platforms, there might ultimately be more opportunities for different kinds of positions, whether you're writing or whether you're, broadcasting, with podcasts and social media, as well as, terrestrial, as we like to call it out here, terrestrial radio, normal, typical radio or television. There might be more opportunities, but on the other hand, I think the larger number of platforms creates a lot of work for young people. Like even sports writers now, a lot of sports writers, they don't just write articles. They have to, write things for social media. They have to do videos and podcasts and all these different things. It's almost like their day is never done. It's become a business that demands a lot of work of its practitioners, but ultimately it's really, really rewarding if you're doing something that you really, really like. And so I would just make sure, if I was getting into the business, that I would, this is something I really want to do. And then the other bit of advice I give people a lot, and have given interns through the years, like a lot of interns who would come to work at our television stations, a lot of kids come there with the fantasy or the desire to, be on air. They want to be in front of the camera or in front of the microphone. And I always tell them, there are rewarding jobs off camera or behind the microphone, or, off camera, or, non-on air type positions, like whether it's a photographer or a writer or a producer. There's a lot of potentially very fulfilling positions that people can find in that respect. So I would go in with your eyes open to all different possibilities. You never know where the trail might take you. You may have your heart set on, being someone like me, being a play-by-play announcer, and then maybe you realize, what, I find the work of the public relations department, say, of a pro football team or a Major League Baseball team, to be interesting work, and maybe that's a path that they'll pursue, or some other avenue. Just be open to all possibilities, because with the larger number of platforms these days, I think there might be a lot of opportunities out there.
My final question for you, Mr. Healey, is, we talked about at the beginning, you and me are both from the Northern Virginia area, right outside DC. What does the DC area and your time growing up in that area mean to you? I mean, you've been in Arizona now for many years. We were talking before we started this recording. You came back to Annandale High School, where you graduated and emceed your 50th high school reunion anniversary. I mean, what does it mean to you to have grown up there, and take with you as you've kind of experienced life and now being in Arizona the last over 3 decades?
It means everything to me, because it's home. I mean, I've lived out here for, like I said, we first moved to Arizona in 1983. So it's been 38 years, with the exception of a year and a half that we spent in Seattle in the late 80s. The Phoenix area has been our home since 1983, and it's my kids' home. But deep down in my heart, if you ask me, where's your home, Tim? My first response would be DC, Northern Virginia, Fairfax County. Born and raised there, went to Annandale High School. And you're right, I was a proud member of the class of '69 at Annandale. A lot of my classmates went to Virginia Tech. My youngest sister is a Tech graduate. My nephew, Evan Picard, is a Tech graduate, and proud Tech graduates they are. And a lot of my classmates at Annandale, the same thing. And but it just was a special place for me to grow up. And I grew up there. I consider the 1960s to be the decade of my youth. When the 60s started, I was in 3rd grade, and when they ended, I was a freshman in college at Penn State. And so that's the decade in which I grew up. And it was an incredible decade in the history of our country, with Vietnam, the civil rights movement, the love generation, Woodstock. It was in his, 3 significant political assassinations: John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, the latter 2 taking place in a 2-month span in the spring of my junior year at Annandale High School. I mean, it was an amazing time, in the history of our country. And it was just it was just a special place to me. I just always have a soft spot in my heart for Northern Virginia and the DC area. And to this day, as you and I talked before we started taping this interview, the one way that I have really tried to maintain emotional ties to the Washington area, even though I haven't lived there since I got out of college in 1973, is my loyalty to the DC sports teams. I've been a Washington football team fan, to be politically correct, my entire life. My dad had Redskins season tickets for the last 35 years of his life. And that's the big way that he and I bonded, just as my son, Joe. I have a 38-year-old son, Joe, who's an Arizona State graduate and a passionate Sun Devil football and Sun Devil sports fan. And Joe and I bond through our mutual love of ASU sports, the way my dad and I bonded through our mutual love of the Redskins. And I was a Washington Senators fan when I was a kid. And when the Expos moved to DC, I quickly became a Nats fan. And, October 30th, 2019 still ranks as one of the proudest nights of my life when the Nats won the World Series, and a memorable run it was. And a year earlier, the Capitals extinguished years of anguish for all of us Caps fans when they took home the Stanley Cup on June 7th, 2018, which, by the way, was 40 years to the day that the Washington Bullets won the NBA championship. And I'll never forget that night because I was producing the 11 o'clock news at the CBS affiliate in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and my second job in the business. And the NBA Finals that year were on CBS, and the game started at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, Game 7 against the Seattle Supersonics in Seattle. And I made sure to get the whole newscast produced and put to bed and ready to roll by 9 o'clock so I could watch the game. So if Scranton burned down after 9 o'clock, there wouldn't have been any information on that on our newscast because I was watching the Bullets and the Sonics in Game 7. And that was the first DC sports championship of my life. So that was really, really incredible. And then, of course, the Redskins winning 3 Super Bowls, although I still feel bad for them that 2 of them are asterisk Super Bowls because 2 of their 3 championships came in strike-shortened seasons in 1982 and 1987. And I still think the 1991 Redskin team that won it all is one of the most underrated, great teams in the history of pro football. In fact, I feel the Joe Gibbs coached Redskins of the first era from 81 to 92 are one of the most underappreciated dynasties in pro football history. When you ask people who follow the NFL about great dynasties, they'll always talk about Vince Lombardi's Packers in the 60s and the Chuck Noll coached Pittsburgh Steelers in the 70s, and the Dallas Cowboys that won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years with Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin in the 90s, and of course the New England Patriots of the new millennium, and the Oakland Raiders of the 70s and early 80s. And very few people will mention the Joe Gibbs coached Redskins. And you look at all of those great franchises, or the 49ers of the 90s, obviously another, of the 80s, I should say, another dynasty. But nobody ever mentions the Joe Gibbs Redskins. And what they did was remarkable. None of those franchises ever won 3 Super Bowls in a 10-year period with 3 different starting quarterbacks. Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, Mark Rippon. And, to me, that's, and they had some really, really good teams that I don't think get the credit they deserve for being among the very best in the history of the NFL. So I'm off my soapbox there, but back to your original question, to me, DC means everything. It's home. It's still deep in my heart. That's my hometown. That's where I was born and raised. And my late parents, were just incredible, wonderful parents, and had a wonderful childhood and great memories of going to Annandale. And it was a wonderful experience to go back to our 50-year reunion in September of 2019 and see the school now. We actually went to an Annandale football game on that Friday night. And an interesting tidbit, Billy, the Annandale lost the game that night. And that was the first losing football game I ever saw in that field because my 4 years at Annandale, the 1965 through 68 football seasons, the Annandale Adams did not lose a single game at home. They only lost one game in those 4 years, and it was a 1-point loss to Jeb Stewart in my senior year of 1968. So great memories growing up there. And I mean, Phoenix is a wonderful place. We live in Mesa, which is a suburb of Phoenix, and it's become our kids' home, and it's our home, and it's probably where I'm going to be laid to rest. But some great memories of growing up in Northern Virginia and DC, and I think Washington's the greatest city on earth.
Mr. Healey, this has been such a pleasure getting to talk to you about your wonderful career, all the great stories and insights and athletes you've covered. Thank you so much for your time today. This has truly been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Billy. Thanks. Appreciate it.
That's Tim Healey, the voice of the Arizona State Devils for almost 3 decades now, a Penn State alum, and of course, a Northern Virginia, D.C. Graduate and raised there as well of Annandale High School. This has been the latest edition of the Post with BP. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time.